We are joined by Senator Kevin Cramer, a Republican from North Dakota, also a member of the Senate Banking Committee. Senator, you have introduced legislation that you say stops banks from discriminating against legal industries. What would it do?
So what it would do is it would prohibit banks from creating categorical exclusions in industries, entire industries, firearms industry, fossil fuel, carbon industries, private prisons. Industries that the banks, many banks, large banks, have categorically stated they are not going to support in the future. And these are legal commerce. These are profitable, companies. I'm just saying that you can't discriminate that way if you're an FDIC insured bank. And if you do, you should probably lose your insurance.
I want to be crystal clear on this because there are some capitalists who say capitalism ought to have a conscience, and that if they are privately funded and individuals deserve to put their money where they want to put their money. Are you saying that the government just shouldn't be able to codify where folks can put their money?
Well, I'm saying any institution that enjoys the backing of the federal government and the backing of the taxpayers shouldn't be picking the winners and losers based on anything other than the traditional cost-benefit analysis and risk analysis and the established criteria, and rather than say this wokeness or this pressure they're getting from proxies and advocacy groups. Unless of course you don't want to be FDIC insured, and of course that would have negative impact.
How has this impacted the energy sector in North Dakota?
So energy is a good example because energy takes a lot of capital. Whether it's drilling a well in the Bakken, building an interstate pipeline, gas wells, coal mining, utilities that maybe want to retrofit their large boiler with clean coal technologies, for example. Those take a lot of capital, and it takes all kinds of capital, equity capital, traditional financing, things like that. And so you could put them out of business. And what you'd be doing by that is you'd be driving those same industries and businesses to other countries that don't have the same type of high standards of environmental protection that we do in the United States.
Let's talk about pipelines. Let's talk about coal. The lawmakers just passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. There's no money for retraining. This new administration has proposed executive orders that are a clear shift from the previous administration on energy policy. Are you concerned about retraining purposes, not just for college age and newly graduate individuals, but people in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s who are working in an energy environment that now is being restructured?
Well, I'm worried. Not only am I worried about them not being able to be retrained, I'm worried about the fact that they should be. They are in legal, good, solid industries with innovators who have made America more prosperous. They've made the world safer. Our national security is dependent to a great degree on our energy security, and so I find the whole notion of undoing America's energy dominance and retreating and acquiescing to other countries ridiculous.
I hear you on that point, but I have to push here. Should you and should lawmakers on both sides of the aisle be doing more and pushing for more funds in order for retraining purposes, especially when this shift has already occurred in the first month of Biden administration?
I'm a strong advocate for that anyway. I'd much rather invest in people's education than their incarceration. Frankly, I think that in the education system in our country, we ought to put more money towards skills training. We ought to put more emphasis toward training people to do the jobs that are available rather than the jobs they wish that were available. So I think we could, in a bipartisan fashion, look at that very closely.
Infrastructure. How are lawmakers going to pay for it? I think they're upwards of $3 trillion. Some estimates are putting this at.
Well, it all depends on the perspective you bring, but if you look at the fact that we just borrowed $2 trillion to just cast this big wide net and do all kinds of crazy things, borrowing it wouldn't be a bad idea in that context. However, I don't think there are a lot of Republicans that want to borrow any more trillions of dollars to add to the already depleting, however, Highway Trust Fund. We need to figure out a way. I think one of the ways with regard to surface transportation is to find some way to charge all of the users of the highway, including electric vehicles. As you know, the trust fund is going down because gas demand is going down, but miles are not. We have to find a different way to formulate that. But I also think we ought to get creative. I think we ought to look at things like, for example, fossil fuel development on federal lands. Rather than shutting it down, how about we use it as a way to appropriately fund the Highway Trust Fund and other infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure can be done by the private sector if you just get out of their way rather than make it more expensive to do things like pipelines.
This is fascinating to me because I think right there is the ideological debate and difference that will shape the infrastructure debate as we move forward. The other week I interviewed Senator Elizabeth Warren. She has proposed, as you know, increasing taxes on billionaires as well as the ultra wealthy. The administration, including Secretary Yellen, have proposed in many ways raising the corporate tax rate back to 28%. What I'm hearing from you is that that would drive foreign investment and other investment and capital away from the United States, and that there's other solutions.
There's no question. I mean, take the corporate income tax, going from 21 to 28. Remember, the reason that we had such a solid economy prior to the pandemic and the reason why it's growing so quickly back to that now is because we were able to lower corporate interest rates, as well as other things. We made it easier to repatriate, stranded U.S. funds that were generated overseas with our tax structure. To go backwards on that at a time like this, at any time, seems completely counterproductive.
Final topic, just from a national security perspective, on the semiconductor chip shortage that a host of different committees, including the Banking Committee, has started to discuss diversifying the supply chain away from China. There are some minerals in your state.
There are.
How do you, is that an area of bipartisanship that you think there could be some cohesion on, especially in a week where Secretary Blinken is traveling overseas?
Well, so there are a couple of things there, but particularly the threat of China. The threat of China has become a very bipartisan issue. It took some people a while to get there, but that is becoming low-hanging fruit for those that like to see bipartisan work, and I think you're going to see some of that here soon. I think when it comes to rare earth minerals and that are necessary for chip manufacturing, for example, the vulnerability of American supply chains in lots of industries, including the chip industry, including pharmaceuticals, including food, we've seen that vulnerability and what that can do to us. Why we acquiesced a lot of this stuff previously is unfortunate. I don't know why, but now it's time to get it back. So I do think there's a lot of bipartisan support for things like that.
Senator, how's Carson Wentz doing since he left my Birds?
Carson Wentz, the last conversation I had a couple of weeks ago, he's fired up, ready to play for a Super Bowl team again.
Oh wait, he's ready. How about we just leave it there, and I won't pick a side in the Carson Wentz debates. Senator Kevin Cramer, a Republican from North Dakota, thank you as always for your time.